Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is scold. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thanks for sharing another great idea with us. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use scold. Scold has two primary definitions, but the first one is by far its most common use, and that meaning is to reprimand or rebuke someone angrily. So, when you think of this particular verb, my mind goes to a couple different situations. I think of parents and children, and a parent noticing that their child is behaving inappropriately, maybe doing something that's mean to another child or doing something they've been told they should not do, right? And so there's kind of that angry, hey, stop doing that. Don't behave in this particular way. As I also think of this verb, my mind goes to teachers and students. And again, my primary idea is focused on younger students. And again, kind of letting them know they're not behaving well. Now, this verb gets used outside of those two situations. Usually, there's kind of a difference in power or difference in level. So we might hear this used in the workplace. But if someone is doing this, kind of like you did this wrong, why did you do it this way? And they're considered equals, that can sometimes be a little dicey from that perspective. So but that is the primary way you are going to hear and see the verb scold used. A second way you may encounter it is if you're a birder. So, someone who really enjoys watching birds, reading about them, and if everything's sort of connected to that hobby. So, it means to call loudly and persistently, right? So the noises that they're making. For now, you should know that scold is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms scolding. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now, our base verb, scold, ends in a d sound. And this means whenever I add the ed ending to a base verb that ends with a d, I'm going to add an extra syllable to the word. So ed here is going to make a sound like id. So our past tense and participle form of the verb should sound like this: scolded, scolded. Now, there are two phrasal verbs you might encounter, but their meaning is really the same, and you can use them in the same way: to scold about or scold for. Again, we're talking about criticizing somebody. Um, and this is often done in kind of an angry tone where you're telling them they failed at something, they made an error or a mistake, or they've done something wrong. So, as an example sentence, I've got the manager scolded numerous team members about their tardiness. And I could say the manager scolded numerous team members for their tardiness. Both of these sentences mean exactly the same thing. So tardiness is another way of saying lateness. So here we have people who are not showing up at maybe their start time. They're late. And so they are being criticized for that error, for that wrongdoing. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different tenses. Today, we'll review the imperative and the present progressive. Let's start with the imperative. We use this to give commands, right? We are telling someone to either do a particular action in the affirmative or to not do a particular action. This is different than giving advice, right? Where we are essentially saying, I think this is a good idea. Try this action, right? Or don't try this particular action. Here, we are commanding someone to do this. The imperative is unique in English because we do not state the subject in this sentence. The subject is implied or it's understood to be either you singular if we're talking to one person or you plural if we're talking to two or more people. So to make an affirmative sentence in the imperative, you can just start with the verb. You can see that in my example here. Scold the puppy when she misbehaves. Right? So maybe this is a dog trainer giving a command to a pet owner as they train this young animal. If you want to make a negative sentence, what you would like to do there is start with do not and then use the base verb. You can also use the contraction don't. An example of this: don't scold young children. Use timeouts to get them to reflect on their behavior instead. So this is common parenting advice that is given. They say frequent scolding. So again, that kind of angry behavior. Why are you doing this? Don't behave in that way. Can create a lot of anxiety for children. And so people who research and study this really encourage trying to have a conversation in more calm ways versus angrily speaking to someone. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the present progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about things that are happening now or actions that are in progress during a time period that has not yet been completed. So many teachers and textbooks will call this the present continuous, and that's just fine. It means the same thing. What I tell my students frequently is I use present progressive. The two P's can help you remember you need two parts to make your verb. So we'll be using a present form of be, and then we'll use the ing form of the verb. So our present form of be has three forms. So we've really got to pay attention to our subject when we make sentences in the present progressive. If your subject is I, you're going to use am, and then the ing form of our verb. If your subject is you, we, or they, use are, A-R-E, and then the ing form of the verb. And finally, if your subject is he, she, or it, use is, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. They are scolding their children for their rowdy behavior. So maybe we're observing a family and we have two parents here engaged in that activity. It's happening right now. If you want to make a negative present progressive sentence, again, we start in the same way. We use the subject, we use the present form of be that matches, then use not before the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. The teacher isn't scolding the class for asking questions, right? So that's not what is happening right now in this particular circumstance. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the present progressive, start with your form of be. You want to use the form that matches your subject. The subject comes next. Then use the ing form of the verb. Here's an example. Are you scolding me? Right? So that, again, might go back to that situation where you have people in sort of equal positions, and it seems like one is angrily correcting or noting some type of failure or error on the part of the other. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb scold. The first word we're going to talk about is a noun. We're going to add the er suffix, and that suffix usually means a person or thing who, and then we can go back to that base verb. So here, a scolder is someone who frequently finds fault with others. They use that kind of harsh or angry language that we've been talking about. An example of this: a new company will send scolders to confront your employer anonymously. I saw this in a news article as I looked for different examples of our verb. This company started maybe 6 months ago, according to a particular article, and that was that idea. If employers are creating policies, doing things that are harmful, but you're afraid to speak up because you might lose your job or be punished for speaking out, you can contact and use this organization, and they will sort of advocate on your behalf. We've talked about scolding as our progressive form of the verb. but it can also be an adjective. The adjective is going to have that same spelling, so just adding ing, same pronunciation. And if we use this word as an adjective, we're describing something or someone angrily rebuking or reprimanding. Again, that idea of like, don't do that, don't behave in that way. An example of this word as an adjective in a sentence: he gave his children a scolding glare and they quieted down. So here, scolding is describing the look, the glare, right? So I know many parents know they can do particular facial movements and communicate a lot with just that kind of look. So that's what happened here. The children knew, like, oh, we shouldn't be so loud, perhaps. Then the last word we'll discuss today is the adverb scoldingly. So we took our adjective, we added ly. Ly is most commonly used to form adverbs. So what this is describing could be an adjective, or we could be describing a verb. So when we use this adverb, it means in a way that criticizes someone harshly or angrily. An example of this: he yelled at the interviewer scoldingly. Right? So here, scoldingly is describing our verb yell. Again, I want to say a special thanks to Louise for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.